Guardians of the B.L.A.D.E. by Adalene Martis. Chapter 7. You better enjoy this. The steady pulse of the facility's yellow alert cast an eerie glow through the dim maintenance tunnels. The AI's calm but relentless voice echoed in the confined space. Warning: oxygen levels below safe limits. Crew advised to wear masks. Therak and Nyra moved with urgency, their padded feet making soft thuds against the metal grating as they prowled deeper into the bowels of the facility. Their breath rasped through their masks. The crisp air that came from their dwindling tanks was dry and cold. Therak glanced at Nyra, noting the slight hitch in her movements, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "How's your oxygen?" he asked, his voice slightly muffled behind his mask. Nyra hesitated. "A little low." "Hold up," he said, stopping abruptly. She turned, ears flicking in question. "What?" Therak didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up and unfastened the half-full tank from his back, detaching the hose. Nyra tensed as he stepped closer, replacing her canister with his. "Therak, what are you doing? If your tank is fuller, you should keep it. You're bigger than me," she pointed out, brow furrowing. "You need a clear head," he said simply. "It's your brain that's getting us out of this." Nyra studied him for a moment, as if weighing the sincerity of his words. Whatever she thought of his reasoning, she kept it to herself. Instead, she turned her attention back to the corridor, her tail flicking slightly. "The next scrubber should be right over here," she said, her voice quieter, a touch gentler. Therak followed her gaze upward. The access tunnel was mounted high on the wall, flush with the ceiling. Nyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she judged the distance, her body tensing in preparation. With a graceful leap, she caught the ledge, her claws scraping softly against the metal as she pulled herself up. Her head poked back over the edge, hand outstretched. "Pass me the scrubber," she said. Therak lifted it up to her, and she took it in her grasp. He heard the quiet clicks of her undoing the old unit, the faint creak of the metal panel shifting as she installed the new one. A moment later, she reappeared, dusting her hands off against her thighs before hopping back down with a soft thud. Therak folded his arms. "What's next?" he asked. Nyra straightened. She looked at him and said, "We need to replace the electrolysis cells." "The what?" said Therak. She turned and eyed him. "The electrolysis cells for the oxygen generation system," she said. "We need them to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen." Therak nodded, trying to absorb the information. "So replacing the electrolysis cells will increase the oxygen supply?" he asked. "Exactly," she confirmed. He glanced at her. "How much time is left on the fabricator?" She shrugged. "About 5 hours," she said. Therak tilted his head. "I thought you had perfect recall," he said. She smirked, the corner of her lip curling. "I remember it was going to take 6 hours, she said. "But unfortunately my brain doesn't have a stopwatch function." Therak let out a short chuckle, appreciating the dry humor. Nyra grinned in return, a small but genuine smile that made her seem a little less exhausted. "The other scrubber took about half an hour to install," she continued. "This one took around the same, so we probably have 5 hours left." Therak nodded. "Maybe we'll finally be able to get a good nap," he said. As they started making their way back to engineering, Therak cast a glance at her. "You want to go back to your room to sleep?" Nyra shook her head. "I redirected all life support to engineering," she said. "Don't you remember?" He didn't remember. In fact, the world was starting to feel unsteady. He blinked, suddenly aware of the sluggishness in his limbs. His breaths had become shallow, each one feeling less satisfying than the last. His vision wavered slightly, his balance shifting beneath him. Looking down at his tank, he realized with a start that his oxygen supply was in the red. "I'm out," he muttered. Nyra's ears shot up. Without hesitation, she grabbed his hand, her grip firm. "Come on," she urged. "I've got you." Therak stumbled, but she held on. "You'd better not pass out," she warned, pulling him along. "I can't lift you." "I'll be fine." His words slurred together. His head felt light, his limbs uncooperative. They reached the doors to engineering, but his fingers felt numb as he tried to lift his hand to the biometric panel. Nyra caught his wrist and pressed his palm against the scanner. A soft click. The door hissed open. Therak staggered inside, taking a knee as his strength gave out. Nyra pushed up his mask, and he gasped in the fresh, oxygen-rich air. The burning in his lungs faded as he took deep, desperate breaths. His head cleared slightly. He became aware of Nyra crouching beside him, watching him carefully. She reached for his mask. "Here, let's get this thing off you," she said, her fingers slipping under the straps. Therak winced the moment she tugged. His mane had gotten tangled in the straps, and the gentle pull became an agonizing yank. "Ow, careful," he growled. Nyra huffed and tried to push the mask off more forcefully, but that only made it worse. A sharp sting flared across his scalp as clumps of his hair began ripping free. "Not the hair! Not the hair!" Therak snarled, flinching as he tried to shift away from her. "Where's it caught?" she asked, her voice filled with more patience than sympathy. Gritting his teeth, Therak pointed to the side of his head. Nyra peered at the tangled mess of fur and straps, her fingers working carefully to unwind the strands. She took her time, making sure not to pull any more hair free than necessary. "You know," she mused, "it'd be a lot more convenient if you just cut this off." Therak recoiled as if she had suggested he cut off a limb. "A male should never cut his mane," he said. "Never suggest such a thing." Nyra blinked at him, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Oh, come on, it's just hair." "It is not just hair," he said firmly. "A mane is serious business." Nyra wiped a tear of mirth from her eye. "Oh? How serious? What does a mane provide you, O mighty feline warrior?" Therak frowned, but his answer was immediate. "It makes me feel better, especially when it's well-groomed." He sat up a little straighter. "Besides, my favorite Edda growing up was the Song of the Lion's Glory, and the great hero Avohar never cut his hair because it made him stronger." Nyra raised a skeptical brow. "Oh, what a load of rubbish." Therak narrowed his eyes. "I wouldn't expect a panthera to understand." Nyra crossed her arms. "No male or female panthera have long hair. We can't grow it even if we wanted to. To say that long hair makes you stronger is insulting to us. We don't like that Edda. Avohar wasn't a hero to us." Therak hesitated, realization hitting him like a blow. The Song of the Lion's Glory told the story of how Avohar had driven the panthera from the Urmah homeworld of Avion, forcing them into a nomadic existence for generations. Growing up, Therak had never thought about that part of the story. He had just liked the action, the adventure, and most of all, the refrain of the hero's song. His ears flattened slightly. I didn't really consider that when I was young," he admitted. "I just liked the fight scenes and the song." Nyra tilted her head. "The song?" Therak cleared his throat, then began to sing the refrain, his deep voice steady and rhythmic. A warrior's strength is in his mane. Uncut, unbroken, it stands like a flame. Through battles fierce and trials long, the lion's pride is ever strong. Nyra let out a bark of laughter. "That's ridiculous," she said. "It's inspiring," he insisted. Nyra looked him over with a critical eye, her gaze lingering on his mane. "Well, I suppose manes aren't all bad," she conceded. Then she covered her mouth with a yawn, her ears drooping slightly. "I'm going to get some rest," she said, stretching her arms as she turned toward the sleeping pallet. Therak watched as she curled up, her tail wrapping around her legs. He ran a hand through his mane. "I've still got it," he thought, allowing himself a secret smile. Therak turned back toward the fabricator, watching as the electrolysis cell continued to take shape within the glowing chamber. The process was mesmerizing, but the longer he stood there, the more he noticed an irritating ringing sound creeping into his ears. The fabricator was loud, far louder than it had any right to be. Grumbling to himself, he made his way over to a storage locker. Pulling it open, he retrieved a pair of thickly padded ear protectors and slipped them over his head, adjusting them around his mane. The ringing in his ears dulled instantly. Much better. As he turned back toward the workbench, his gaze drifted to Nyra. She had already fallen into a deep sleep, stretched across the pallet, with one foot dangling over the edge. She had her hands pressed against her ears, a futile attempt at muffling the noise. Therak huffed. That couldn't be very effective. He grabbed another set of ear protectors and padded over to her side. "Nyra," he murmured, giving her a gentle tap on the shoulder. Nothing. Her breathing remained deep and steady, her face completely slack in sleep. A small pool of drool had begun forming on the pallet beneath her open mouth. Therak sighed, shaking his head. The poor girl must have been exhausted working so hard on so little sleep. Carefully, he slid the ear protectors onto her head, adjusting them so they fit snugly over her ears. As he did, he hesitated, taking a moment to observe her. She was sprawled across the pallet in the most inefficient way possible. When they had set up the bedding, there had been more than enough space for both of them. But now, with her arms and legs splayed out, there was no way he could lie down without crowding her. He wasn't sure how she would react to waking up that close to him. Now that she was off her heat, she had shown no interest in lying with him. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, nor did he particularly want to wake up to her claws at his throat if she changed her mind about wanting to get revenge. Letting out a small sigh, he pulled the spare blanket from the pallet and draped it over his arm. He glanced at the cold metal floor. Wonderful. He crouched to lay the blanket down, but hesitated. His eyes flicked back to Nyra. She doesn't have much insulation either, he thought. She's going to freeze. Almost as if responding to his thoughts, she shivered in her sleep, curling in on herself slightly. Therak groaned under his breath and picked the blanket back up. Instead of keeping it for himself, he carefully laid it over her, tucking the edges in just enough to keep the warmth from escaping. Straightening, he rubbed his neck. His muscles ached from exhaustion, but the idea of lying down on the cold metal floor wasn't appealing. Instead, he made his way to a nearby desk, grabbed a stool, and sat down heavily. He rested his head on his folded arms, closing his eyes. It's just for a few hours, he told himself. Therak was jolted awake by the sound of the fabricator powering down, the mechanical hum cutting off with a final hiss. He groaned as he lifted his head, wincing as his spine crackled. His legs throbbed, feet swollen from sleeping upright. He let out a disgruntled grumble and rubbed his face, willing himself to wake up properly. On the pallet, Nyra stirred. Her ears flicked as she lifted her head, blinking groggily. She let out a soft, confused sound before looking at the blanket wrapped around her. Her brow furrowed as she sat up slightly, gripping the fabric. She then scratched her head and knocked her ear protectors off to flop on the pallet below. She looked at them for a moment and picked them up in surprise. Slowly, she turned her gaze toward Therak. He was shifting uncomfortably on the stool, trying to straighten his aching back, his tail flicking in irritation. As he noticed her looking, he stood and stretched. "The electrolysis cells are done. Ready to get some fresh air?" he asked. Her expression softened as she looked back at the blanket and the ear protectors. "Yeah," she said. Nyra pushed the blanket off her lap and swung her legs over the pallet, her movements slow, still shaking off sleep. She stood, stretching her voluptuous frame. He watched, transfixed, as her shirt pulled tight against her chest, highlighting her curves. Then she wiped the drool from her face with the back of her hand. The slight flaw in her appearance set Therak free, enabling him to stop staring. "Did you sleep well?" he asked while popping his back into place. She nodded. "I did, thanks to you." She paused for a moment to toy with the ear protector she held in her fingers. Then she looked up and locked her eyes with his. "Therak," she said, "you've been going out of your way to make me feel better. I want to let you know I really appreciate that." Therak's own discomfort was instantly forgotten. Her genuine words made him feel tingly and warm, a fact which showed plainly on his face as his expression brightened into a goofy grin. He surprised himself with how happy she made him just then. Nyra seemed shocked as well. She blinked twice while taking in his unguarded, boyish grin, before quickly turning away and stepping toward the fabrication bay. The newly printed part sat gleaming under the harsh facility lights. It was a large, bulky component, reinforced with heat-resistant plating to withstand the immense power of the oxygen generation system. Therak reached down and lifted it with ease, flexing his arms slightly as he adjusted his grip. "Need help with that?" Nyra offered, standing beside him now, her golden eyes flicking over the component. "I've got it," Therak replied. "Not heavy at all." Nyra scoffed, shaking her head. "Show off," she muttered. They put on their oxygen masks and retrieved the last remaining tanks of fresh air. As they made their way down the halls, Nyra's tone was softer than usual. "After we get this installed, next up is cleaning the vents and fixing the broken fans," she said. Therak adjusted his grip on the cell as they turned into a quieter corridor. "Do we need to get all of them clean?" he asked. "Just the ones that are completely clogged, for now," she replied, her voice muffled by her mask. "Most of the fans are still operational, but if we don't clean the blocked ducts, air circulation won't improve." Therak nodded. "Good. Less crawling through maintenance tunnels." Nyra smirked. "If you get stuck again, I'm going to leave you there." Therak laughed awkwardly. For some reason he couldn't explain, her joke landed wrong with him. It left him feeling somewhat hurt, more than it should have. Perhaps it was because he'd been alone so long that he'd become unaccustomed to banter. He adjusted the large hydrolysis cell in his grip and tried to ignore the sting. After ducking through the maintenance tunnels for a while, they arrived at the oxygen generation system's maintenance chamber, an old but sturdy-looking room, lined with reinforced conduits and sealed tanks. The OGS itself was a massive unit built into the bulkhead, its function vital for turning stored hydrogen and carbon dioxide into breathable oxygen. Therak set the new electrolysis cell down and looked over at the old one still in place. Nyra crouched next to it, pulling open a side panel to expose its inner workings, causing fetid water to leak out onto the rust-stained floor. "See this?" she said, running a claw along the inside. "The electrodes are corroded. That buildup reduces efficiency. The membranes here," she pointed at thin, delicate layers separating sections of the cell, "are contaminated, and the seals have pulled back, which means it's been leaking," she said. "No wonder it's not working." "Yeah, no wonder," said Therak, trying to sound like he understood what she's talking about. "Wow, just look at these anodes and cathodes," she said. There's no way there's going to be a proper redox reaction going on here. And with the membrane contaminated, the proper diffusion of protons can't happen. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was some gas leakage. We're lucky there wasn't a fire in the hydrogen tank. She concluded. Therak squinted, trying to process all the information. He understood the basics, but he'd skipped chemistry in lieu of martial training. Right. That's bad, he concluded. Nyra huffed in amusement. Yes, Therak, that's bad. She wore a sad smile. You didn't understand a word I just said, did you? She said gently. Not really, he admitted. She removed a rusted component with ease, flicking her ear as she glanced at him. All right, let's make this simpler, she said, her tone patient. Imagine your lungs. They take in air, process it, and send oxygen to your blood, right? He nodded. This system works kind of the same way, she continued, except it's processing water to create oxygen. But if the membranes get contaminated, it's like trying to breathe through a soaked rag. It's inefficient, she said. Therak nodded again, this time more thoughtfully. All right, so we need to replace it before we start choking. Exactly, Nyra confirmed. Now listen carefully, because I'm not going to install this. You are, she said. Therak paid attention to Nyra as she told him what to do, methodically removing the damaged unit. She helped him remove the old cell and align the new one. But aside from that, she only instructed Therak, teaching him how to handle the installation on his own. Despite their dire situation, she was calm and patient, explaining things without sarcasm or frustration. She didn't scold him for not understanding things right away. He found himself admiring her for that. He watched as she examined the rest of the unit with wide, interested eyes. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He asked. Nyra paused, glancing at him before giving a small shrug. I've always wanted to work on spacecraft, she admitted, her tail flicking. I dedicated my life to it. She pulled another panel loose and examined it. I never anticipated getting to work on a ship this big at my age, she said. Therak folded his arms, watching her carefully. He never thought he'd see someone get excited over maintenance work. You better enjoy it too, she added, giving him a sideways look. I've got a lot of tasks for you. Therak let out a low chuckle. Wait, who's in charge here? Nyra smirked, but didn't answer. She didn't need to.